So it's very important to understand there are two types of poverty: relative poverty and absolute poverty. And in this video we're going to look at the key definitions of these terms. Poverty causes a market failure, a failure of the capitalist system, but results in huge inequalities unless checked by the welfare state, etc. So, what do we mean by absolute poverty? Well, basically the World Bank and UN definition is that it's an income below which you cannot afford the basic needs of life. And these will clearly be things such as food, shelter and heating. So for example, in a country like the UK, we talk about rough sleepers, people are homeless, and people that use food banks as indicators of absolute poverty, because obviously there's a problem in terms of shelter or in terms of food. Heating, fuel poverty can be another issue and another aspect of absolute poverty. Absolute poverty in the UK is meant to be around about 20%. So the Trussell Trust, for example, gave out 1.3 million food parcels in 2017, 2018, don't know on there, in the UK alone. Now, the UN defines it in 2015 as less than $1.25 a day, less than about £1 a day. But this money, that income, would go much further, obviously, in a poor country than in a rich country. And so the costs of living in respective countries clearly matters. So the income figures are really just a proxy for basic needs. So in the UK, the definition is roughly about £20,000 a year. It's taken to be 60% of the median income in 2010, 2011, when that's been adjusted for inflation. And that's where the 20% of the UK population being in absolute poverty comes from. However, relative poverty is the idea that you're relatively poor. So compared to 100 years ago, people who are considered to be relatively poor now are actually quite well off, okay, because they maybe live in a house with an indoor bathroom, an indoor loo, maybe with carpets, they can afford to heat the house. So that's very different to maybe 100 or 150 years ago in the 19th century. But relative to today's society, if your household income is below 60% of median income, you're considered to be in relative poverty. And this figure is the case in the UK and EU countries. And that's the criteria for relative poverty in those countries. Below this, individuals arguably can't participate meaningfully in society. So if you don't have a TV, you don't have a smartphone, you don't have a fridge, you don't have a microwave, you don't have a washing machine, you don't have access to the internet, you can't partake fully in society. So if you're unemployed, you can't shop so easily or find jobs if you haven't got access to the internet. Indeed, it's actually quite hard to claim benefits if you haven't got access to the internet, because government services are increasingly digitized, for example. So this relates very much to the concept of social exclusion. If you don't have these things, you're excluded from a meaningful place and part in society. And this is a big concept that the Labour Party pursued under Blair and Brown from 1997 to 2010, the idea of preventing and reducing social exclusion. So you've got two key definitions there of absolute poverty and relative poverty. I hope that's useful. Thank you for watching.